Sorry. So on to item 5, which is the public forum, and over to the public. Okay, Colin.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. I wish to raise awareness of the landscape heritage assets of Tum Hill. Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry about that. Is that any better? Okay. I wish to raise awareness of the landscape heritage assets of Tum Hill. Predominantly and most famous really is Caster Cliff, but I'm really talking about the Caster Cliff enclosure complex. While we are aware that buildings can be a heritage asset, so can a monument, site, place or area of landscape, identified as having a degree of significance because of its heritage interests. The Caster Cliff enclosure complex. East Lancashire is a significant prehistoric heritage. Most people will be aware of Caster Cliff Iron Age hill fort. There are 6 hill forts in the northwest. The only one with multiple ring ditches is Caster Cliff, and is even more special because of its stone and timber construction. We all know Caster Cliff Hill Fort is on the Nelson side of the administrative boundary. This boundary is purely artificial and was arrived at before the understanding of the wider site had evolved. Most of the archaeology associated with the hill fort, along with the majority of the Caster Cliff enclosure complex, is within the Colne Town Council boundary. For example, the Mesolithic finds of Peter Worley collection at Pendle Heritage Centre are from the wider hilltop site on the Colne side of the boundary. Historically, the heritage focus of this area has been upon Caster Cliff Hill Fort alone, rather than the main area of archaeological significance, which is really not correct, and it's really, you could think of this as a tail wagging the dog situation. In 2013, this entire area was scanned by LiDAR. LiDAR is a non-invasive technique which establishes ground surface topography. This high-resolution scan revealed a large multiple ring ditch settlement of great significance on the northwest corner of the former Tum Hill Recreation Ground, and in addition to this rectangular subsurface structures indicative of a Roman camp are present, and is located across the boundary of the recreation ground to the west and follows the topography to its highest point. The location of the Roman camp has been speculated upon for many years, and this is its probable location. The Caster Cliff enclosure complex demonstrates other multiple enclosures and possible areas of occupation across the hilltop site and the wider landscape. There are multiple overlapping features indicative of areas of occupation ranging from the Mesolithic, Iron Age, Roman, Celtic, early medieval periods. The setting and context of these are also significant. The pattern of the landscape still demonstrates the historical field types developed over time. It doesn't detract from the setting of Caster Cliff or the enclosure complex, but provides a context for the nested and overlapping relationships that historical features often have. Although at present there has been some development on the lower slopes, the more elevated areas remain free of structures that would detract from the setting of this historically important site. Therefore, there is a historical value in the surviving landscape field patterns, indicative of those periods, as a heritage asset in themselves. The site is very special and certainly worthy of investigation and protection for future generations. It is essential to protect this area to appreciate fully the Caster Cliff enclosure complex and its context in the wider landscape. So is it possible to protect the enclosure complex within some sort of conservation area, as this also would concur with the Trawden Parish Council conservation area to the east? Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed reading this document, and I don't know whether you know this about me, but I've got a degree in archaeology.
Have you really?
Yeah, I know. And I'm really, obviously, very interested in old field patterns and the kind of nerdy things that most people would not be interested in. Certainly from a heritage asset perspective, my take on this is, obviously, you know that the Caster Cliff Fort is a scheduled ancient monument,
yes, I know
and it's in Nelson. But you're quite right to say there's a much broader area that probably isn't protected now, that's within open countryside. I'm going on a webinar on, sounds like I'm going somewhere, I'm not going anywhere. There is a webinar on Thursday about making changes to your MADE plan.
Yes.
So obviously I would very much like to put this broader area forward as a sort of richness of prehistoric and medieval archaeology for Cone and the Cone area as something to be put forward for our MAID plan. I would very much say that obviously because of the topography with the views, this area is highly visible in the landscape and therefore it's strongly protected by our landscape document. I don't know whether, have you read that?
Yes.
Yeah, so it is strongly protected. So I'm going to sort of hand over to our expert. You raise the question, could it be considered a landscape heritage asset in the future? I'm not sure that's a designation, but over to you, Michael.
Thank you.
Oh, you haven't got to.
Not showing red for me.
Who is it?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, as Sarah said, the neighbourhood plan already includes a landscape policy. Anything outside of the Colne neighbourhood area boundary, the Colne neighbourhood plan has to stay silent on. In terms of things like conservation area, then that's again, it's a separate piece of legislation.
And it's Pendle as well.
Yeah.
That's why our list of non-designated heritage assets has quite a few character areas. And before we lost our conservation officer, that sounds like sadly she's met an accident, she just retired. But before she retired, she said to me, if only we had the money to make these areas conservation areas. So it's something that I will be continuing to campaign on, but there is a cost attached to Pendle. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, so I think in terms of the report's 3 recommended actions, my advice would be on the first of those, in terms of maintaining an up-to-date list of heritage assets. That really, again, is a local planning authority job. So I think this information needs to be passed to the local planning authority. The Knots Lane allotments, the plan as it stands already has a policy to protect those, so I don't really think this changes that. And I was saying before, in terms of that wider landscape and the history of that wider landscape, the neighbourhood plan already includes the landscape policy, but again, I do think this information needs to be shared with the local planning authority and also Historic England, because if it is as significant as this evidence suggests, then maybe it is for others to reconsider what they can do through their powers rather than through the neighbourhood plan.
I do know, if you compare, and I'm not suggesting that Castercliff Hillfort is on the scale of Stonehenge, but the whole broad area around Stonehenge, to a really enormous distance really, is full of unexplored archaeology. And that's why there's been, for so many years, the controversy over the tunnel and the road and all of that, because nobody's really quite sure where that sphere of influence ends, and probably likely to remain unsure without huge sums being put into archaeological excavation. But certainly it would be wise to perhaps, for a future iteration of the plan, create a little area that we could shade in and discuss some of the things that have been brought up here and the significance with the development of Cone. What do you think, Colin? Okay, I appreciate that. Oh,
Sorry. I'm not here to delay anything or stop the plan going forward.
you're just here to give us more information.
There is more information, and I can collate the rest of the information for the other areas of Col, because to the north and to the east and west, there are other areas not quite as significant as this, but part of a larger complex of habitation that's prehistoric. I'm quite happy to do that and prepare other documents in a similar way, if that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. It's all helpful, and this is the point of grassroots planning, really, because, you know, I always give this example. Paul Foxley is an architect, and he had very strong views about the top of the town and how it could be, and I was just thinking, oh, it's a bit out there, it'll never happen. And we wrote it down in an early part of the plan, and it now seems to be happening. Some of the sort of concepts that he pushed with his knowledge, his experience. And so the neighbourhood plan is stronger from having local knowledge. Jerry was able to give a huge amount of information on Ball Grove, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's no one person, even Michael Wellock can't know everything.
Of course not.
So we're very grateful for.
But I did think, in terms of heritage assets, that as it was a live document that was continually being updated, or there would be a period of updating or revision.
Yes, there will be a revision, but it'll be after the plan is made.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not saying delay the plan to do this.
And I noted about, you know, with this planning permission to knock down 2 of the buildings in the list of non-designated heritage assets, and we've taken several out, haven't we, Gina? Because they've either been expunged or just totally trashed. So we've still got the Northern Lights on Varley Street, and we've still got the Engine House on the South Valley. But we'd really thought about taking them out, but then we thought, no, wait a minute, nothing might happen yet. Let's see, let's keep it in. And you never know, it could come forward in the planning application or change in some way. We've done the work. While they're still there, we'll keep them in our list.
Yeah.
Okay, so anybody got any further questions on item 5? Oh, well, we've got John, of course. But dealing with Colin, first of all, any questions for Colin? No? So, John?
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, Chair and Committee. I'm John Birchenough, local resident of Colne, and again, thank you for this opportunity to make some comments. They're more general than the previous quite detailed comment, I have to add. But thanks for that. I did make a couple of comments at last Tuesday's council meeting, where I learnt of tonight's meeting, and it would suggest that I could come along this, say a few words, and more importantly, find out more about what is going on. So here we are. Over the years, starting from, if not the very first roadshow, then I think it was certainly one of the first ones, there was Jerry, Sarah and a couple of other folk there who aren't with us this evening, down at Primmet Hill Community Centre. And I hate to think how many years ago that was. I'm sure you could tell me to the month probably.
2018, and it was actually the royal wedding, I think it was, or something.
So it was, as we all said, a long time ago. And I made comments then, I have done in between times and participated in various consultations, the last being on the design codes. But via the website, I've tried to find updated statements on where the plan is in terms of its development and what the latest timeline and projections are. And I've had difficulty in doing that. So I'm wondering whether you can point me in the right direction. And as public participation is asked for, is encouraged, and indeed it's a vital part of neighbourhood plans, then I think it would be useful if members of the public can readily find out what's going on and where we are along the times and development of the plan itself. I recall that originally, I may be wrong, but I think the plan was scheduled for Reg 15, sort of last September, October, if not in fact earlier.
Yeah, earlier.
So I obviously share the disappointment if it's running so late, and particularly after the hard, tireless work and effort and time that you all put in to the process. I'm not sure of all the delays, but believe that some are due to outside causes, perhaps Department of Environment, consultants, late additions, and probably others, which other than, and I did in fact, in my first notes, I did put other than leaning on them, but I've decided to put encouraging. So rather than encouraging and reminding the outside bodies of their obligations, it may be out of your control, their progress or lack of it. But I do hope that they certainly offer recovery plans where their original and agreed timing is running over for your committee to agree and to consult on. I do want to say, though, that what obviously is in your control as the committee is, what obviously is in control is the activities of this committee. So please continue to progress the plan for our town in a speedily and efficient manner as you possibly can. I'm certainly supportive of the plan. I believe it to be very important for the planning and development of the whole of Colne. And I do not intend any criticism of the teams involved, but I am concerned as to why the delays, where are we now, and what is the future programming and timing. I've been told that the plan could be ready for Reg 15 this coming May or June. I certainly hope that's true, and I hope it's on track for this. So thank you for your time, hopefully some answers, and certainly for the work with this important matter.
Thank you, John, for your support. It's hugely appreciated by us that people care. Gina and I often discuss that although Colne Town Council does so many things across the town, this is probably the most important thing that it does, the outturn of this, which will affect the future of the town for the next decade or so, is so important, and it's come from the grassroots. I was involved in the Trawden plan. The Trawden plan was a village, although it was a site allocating plan. When we went out to Regulation 14, we listened very carefully to the criticism that we got that called for extra reports. The extra reports have taken, it's not that the reports themselves have taken a long time. So for example, we had to write a tender document for the site assessments, then we had to, the landscape, then we had to do it, then we had to review it, then we had to review it again, then it had to go to full council, and all of this actually is many more months than we were anticipating. We're now in a position whereby the full council has passed several of the documents. There are still quite a few more documents to go, but we have assurances from where there are outside consultants. Like today, we received an email, didn't we, Gina, saying that we will definitely be getting the master planning before the end of this month. Now, we're hoping that there's minimal change to that master planning and we can put that in front of the council as speedily as possible. But we don't know because we've not seen that. I think it's true to say that the design code was a lot more involved than I anticipated, and I knew it would be in a complex document, and so it has proved. And that comes up later on the agenda tonight because Gina has gone through all the comments and suggestions. So this is a much bigger neighbourhood plan than Trawden. There are many more documents. Michael mentioned that it was in the top, what did you say, 5% or something? 1%. Oh no. So, but understandably, of all neighbourhood plans that are made. I mean, here's a stat for you. I don't know whether I think I said this at full council. In terms of deprived areas around the country, and that's classified as in the bottom 20% in the index of deprivation. Waterside is in the bottom 5%, just to give you an idea. So in deprived areas, the number of neighbourhood plans that come forward that qualify for that tag, 4%. So we're in a really, really small sphere here. We've had an awful lot to do, and well, I've just said how wonderful it is that we can draw on Jerry and Paul and Colin and suck up all of that knowledge to inform our plan. At the same time, too, we are amateurs. I'm doing this for the second time, but the rest of you are all doing it for the first time. So, it is problematic. You're dealing with actual people. So there've been times that Gina's been with me on the journey where we've said, this landowner is keen. Do you remember that? Oh, he's so keen. And I really won't write it down. And all of this kind of thing where will they, won't they, and all of this. And you've got to give enough time to give people to come in behind you. And obviously we've had all the consultations as well. So yes, I can't say it's been smooth, nor has it been easy, but something that's complicated actually can't be. I read the responses in this document, and somebody's written, oh my goodness, this is all far too much. Somebody's written, oh, for heaven's sakes, or whatever. And I sort of do understand, but it's a legal document. Pendle Council, in their response, has said, how are we to apply this in the real world? And that's a question that we've got to answer so that it's actually a document that's used and is useful. So, yeah, but thank you very much for your concern and support. We have passed the marketing prospectus, the coal report, the viability report, the list of the non-designated heritage assets, the landscape and long-range views. And I know that we are really close to some of the others. The fact that Gina has done the design code for this meeting, presumably, and I'm looking at Michael, means that that's just all roll forward now, so that all the consultations can be presented. So that's something that we can bring to the next full council, isn't it? Because that's just another thing. Another thing that we can bring to the next full council, presumably, is the SEA and HRA? No? What we discussed earlier? Yeah, we'll discuss that some more. We'll discuss that some more when we come to it. So we can the green spaces, so we can hopefully bring 3 or 4 documents to April's full council, potentially, and then do the same in May. Brian.
Have Colin and John got a copy of this Cold Naval Plan?
Yes, thank you. Would it be possible for me just to make a comment on that now? Yeah, we have, and that's very useful. But it does bring me back to one of the comments, or one of my concerns, is it doesn't give any timeline.
No.
Now, maybe that is because of my lack of, and I'll stand corrected. That may be because of my lack of in-depth knowledge of what else is going on the back pages behind that. But it doesn't give any. It's great, to say yes at full council, yes we may. There's only one comment on here that I've seen quickly. Confirmed it will take 2 weeks. Everything else, other than the dumb ones, which are great to see, there's no indication. So there's no. When I used to work, I was sort of heavily involved in industry and quality and Japanese procedures and all sorts of things, and everything had to be qualified and quantified and measurable.
Yeah.
And my concern about, despite all the hard efforts, my concern is it doesn't seem to be measurable.
No.
And I'm wondering whether, easier said than done, of course, whether there is some matrix or some way that this could be explained in a more understandable and measurable, and then it's easier to give and more encouraging to give congratulations when something is achieved.
I really don't
just a statement.
yeah. I really don't think it can, and for the simple reason that we don't know how many iterations any document might actually go through. So if we take the design code, how many times did it come to this meeting, and how many times did we have to redo page 58? And I would say it was 3. It was quite a few. So I made a series of changes before anybody else saw it, because actually first iteration was like for another town, wasn't it, Gina? You remember. So you can't be sure how many iterations something's going to go through, and then it's not a business, it is a council, so it has to be passed by this committee, and then when it's passed by this committee it has to go to full council, so that's another month always. So there is uncertainty, and I think it would be potentially misleading and potentially unhelpful if we said, we think that the master plans will be bob on. They might be. And then we can instantly present them pass them at this committee and pass them to full council. We can't be sure, can we? We can't be sure. So I think to stop misleading people, I was hopeful that this would be done last year, and we'd be at regulation 15 last year. I don't think I'm a fantasist, but to make sure that everything is right, all the maps are right, things that are very important, like page 58 of the design code is right, it is right that we do that wrangling to make sure that it's submitted, and to the best of our ability, it is right. And that's the problem, and that's why I don't think that we can give you an exact time frame. But all I can say is that we're all doing our best. We can't wait. The drinks are on me when we're at Wetherspoons and everything is all signed off and ready for Reg 15. Okay, all right. Anybody else got any things to add there? Documents needing full council approval. So this is the next one that we're pushing forward, which has again been, I don't know how many times, little tweaks, little changes. Everything from, extra detail to making sure that there's consistency of conclusions. I read this again. I think it reads exceptionally well now. I'm very pleased with it. It's a beautiful piece of work. I'm happy to propose that we put this forward to the next full council meeting. Cool.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favour? Marvellous. So that's another one pushed forward. That's only one, but we're just slowly ticking them off. Right, okay, site viability. So we've already alluded to this. We received an email today that the site viability master planning will be ready before the end of the month, and we hope to receive it. However, there is another element that we need to discuss. Michael and I have already discussed it today, and it involves the Environment Agency. Perhaps you'd like to explain it, Michael.
The Environment Agency were consulted on the strategic environmental assessment screening. They didn't respond initially, but when we finally got a response from them, they have made a formal objection to the plan because of sites allocated within flood zones. We have, behind the scenes, sought to sort of allay some of those concerns and see if they would remove that objection. But the latest email suggests that that's not the case, and they retain objections on what were 4 sites, one of which we've previously agreed to take out of the site allocation policy. But those objections remain to the Cotton Tree Lane site, Spring Gardens Mill and Walk Mill. The The substance of the Environment Agency objection is twofold. One, they're saying that they haven't seen sufficient evidence to say that we've carried out a sequential test which would tell us whether there are not reasonable alternative sites elsewhere that are not affected by flood risk. Now, unfortunately, you're only planning for Colne. And government advice on the sequential test, which is largely aimed at local authorities, but there is a subsection on neighbourhood plans, does talk about whether there are reasonable alternatives outside the neighbourhood area. Now, I'm afraid that's a question we can't answer because we don't have that information. And I don't believe Pendle have, given that they're going back to look at local plan part 2. The second part of it is that if sites are considered sequentially preferable, whether or not a thing called an exceptions test has been undertaken. And that particularly relates to one site, which is the Walk Mill site. But I think, given where we are with the sequential test, I think that's a bit of a minor problem at this stage. What does that mean overall in terms of the housing allocations? Well, one of the sites we were sort of hedging our bets a little, which was the Spring Gardens Mill site. We never included that in the housing figure. We'd said it could be housing, it could be employment, but we won't include it. We'll err on the side of caution. But what it would mean would be if we were to lose the Cotton Tree Lane site and the Walk Mill site, we'd probably be down, I think, 130, 160 units. I haven't written it down here, but that would impact on the overall housing allocation figure. What's my advice? My advice is, given where we are with the Environment Agency, given where we are with the sequential test, my advice, and based on what we've just been discussing in the last 5-10 minutes about moving the plan forward, my advice would be to take out the sites that are affected by flood risk. And that may overcome the Environment Agency's objection, because what they say in their email is, if you remove the sites, we may look at this again and maybe reach a different conclusion. And I think that'd be the speediest way to resolve this.
And how many would we be left with, Michael, if all of these sites came out? It's a very difficult position. Chorlton was in this position. They had Black Car Mill. It really delayed their plan. It delayed it by many months. The Environment Agency objected to Black Car Mill, which is something that all the villagers and members of their neighbourhood plan working group wanted to see included. And while they did all the sequential testing and worked out a very detailed master plan with mitigating features, the plan, sort of just went into abeyance. It was a really complicated thing. It is very to be regretted that the Environment Agency took so long to come back to us in the first place with their responses. And Cotton Tree Lane is one of our master planning sites, so we'd have to tell locality, wouldn't we? Brian.
I'll just confirm, is it just 3 sites taking out, or is it?
Yes.
The objection related to 4 sites, but one's already been removed. The 3 sites are the Cotton Tree Lane site, Spring Gardens Mill and Walk Mill. Just going back to the figure, and there's still work to be done on this because the monitoring information is lagging behind somewhat. But based on, with those 3 sites in, we would have had allocations of 321 units, but we'd lose 166.
So, are those sites viable but not as viable as we were hoping? Or all the unit? I'm just a bit confused by what you just said then. We
So
had
we're not talking
300
about
odd
viability,
units.
we're not talking about viability, we're talking about flooding. We're talking about the Environment Agency. So we're not considering viability because we've done the viability and all of our sites are viable on some level. In fact, Cotton Tree Lane was one of the least viable of all, oddly. So we're looking at here what we'd be left with. And that is, in my view, still far more than we need.
So it's not as bad then as I thought.
Perhaps not.
Right.
Just some clarification. If Michael can just clarify what the Environment Agency have said. They're saying if we take them out now, so we say, right, we're not including them because you said that, but that they might reconsider them in the future, which is a bit...
No, I think the point is it would be an awful lot of work for us to undertake for this plan, but it is possible that a developer, if a developer was so minded, just like as we've seen at Greenfield Road now, to do the sequential testing, it's worth it to them, to do the sequential testing, to do the analysis, the mitigation and so on as part of their scheme. But it would take them some time, and it would take us probably longer because we'd be asking for favours from our local planning authority rather than using a series of sort of highly paid consultants.
What they're saying is that you're seeking to allocate certain sites that have risk of flooding. National policy says you should only do that if you've carried out a sequential test that says there are no alternatives that are not affected by flood risk. What the Environment Agency is saying is we can't see that you've done that.
Which we haven't.
Which we did have a flood risk report, but ultimately it's not a question, unfortunately, that it's in your remit to answer. What they are saying they would reconsider is if you remove those sites, we may consider removing our objection because basically you're staying silent on the matter. It may be that somebody does this, Pendle do the sequential test, and they turn around and say, yes, that site has a flood risk, but we've no alternatives, therefore we must allocate it. But that wouldn't be through your plan.
That was what came across.
So,
that's all I was trying to clarify. If they're out, it's the objection to the plan that they're removing. But if if they still exist, come along and say we're going to redevelop Cotton Tree Lane, that's a different ballgame because it's not us that have, it's not in the plan, it's just a piece of land.
If that were to happen, if Wimpy, I don't know whether they exist, if Wimpy were to come along to develop Cotton Tree Lane and they worked with Pendle to do a full sequential analysis, exceptions test, all of that, say that it passed, say that it did, then, albeit that it wasn't in our plan, those numbers would come off the total. Jerry.
Thank you, Chair. Two things. First of all, on that last point you've just made, that would enhance our numbers if that did come through, I assume, and the neighbourhood plan would not count against, assuming it had been made by then, that would not stop that development in Cotton Tree Lane going ahead.
Well, it's not a protected landscape and most of it is brownfield land, so.
Yeah. And the second point is, I vaguely remember from the viability study that it was suggested that some of the sites that we'd chosen could have denser infill,
Yes.
which would in fact increase the numbers slightly. Is it worth doing that just to give us a little bit extra?
These are the super urban ones, flats versus
Yeah,
detached houses or whatever.
I'd leave the consultants doing the viability to just get on with the job. At the end of the day, it's a set of assumptions. Should that show that viability is better than the higher level study, then so be it. But I think we could play about with these things forever and a day. I think I'd go with what the assumptions that they're using at the moment.
Jonathan.
So what can we do now then? What are our options?
It looks like Michael is saying to us that a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Go for the 165 that are delivered by the sites that aren't objected to, but presumably we will have to contact locality and Way and his team tomorrow and tell him not to waste any more time master planning a site.
155.
Sorry, 155.
Where is Walk Mill? I'm buzzing it's not. It's rocking the rain.
It's down in the South Valley.
Yeah, it's the one. How many is on there? Is there anybody on there? It's the Pressworth, and it's the opposite. Opposite it's on the other side.
The other side of Spring Garden.
It was Pressworth.
The other side of the river.
And there, back of Rush.
Oh no, I'm still on the line. I've only rushed the start, sorry. Or press pedals.
Can I just remind people to use the microphones, please?
Is this the land that's right next to Shore Street? It's like wasteland now. So it's ideal for development, isn't it? Really. But they're objecting on grounds of flooding from a river that's hardly ever flooded. It's just annoying, isn't it, now, at this stage?
I think what's most annoying is they've been so delayed, like a year delayed. To come with this bombshell now is really frustrating. Sorry? Michael.
Yeah, I think you've two choices here. You either keep the 3 sites in, and that means commissioning some further work, or hoping that Pendle have done the work and can help you out. And I think that is inevitable delay. I can't, hand on heart, say whether that'll mean the Environment Agency, remove their objection. They may turn around and say, well, fair enough, but we still disagree. Yeah. And I think the alternative is take the sites out. Hopefully that addresses their concerns. It allows the plan to move forward, because so many of the documents that we've been talking about, and they're on this list that we've got here, the site assessments report, finalising the plan, the heritage appraisal, and then the basic condition, the consultation statement, none of those can be put to bed till we've got a draft plan, and this really this would hold everything up. Yes, it impacts on the figures, but the figures at the minute are a movable feast. Pendle are going back to look at the local plan, more than likely on a lower figure. We were already beyond the requirement.
If you remember, at Reg 14, had we built everything that we've given planning permission for, which we all know is not true, We all know that's not true. Brown Street West hasn't come forward. Combe Business Centre hasn't come forward. So we know it's not true. But at that stage, our target was 1. So this it is a lot of homes. You know, I know that the current plans for the market development are 35. There's another, is it 6 or 8 flats on Keighley Road that we given planning permission for. So they keep coming forward, all of these. It's now not 1. If we built everything, it would be a minus figure.
So I think my advice is take them out. It allows us to finalise everything, get everything signed off, and then move to that Regulation 15 submission stage. And it may be in time that things like the Cotton Tree Lane site come forward anyway. You know, there's a developer there already working on the site. I've seen a letter that they've supplied. That may bizarrely become a commitment that you could add to your housing figure. It's just that it couldn't come through the neighbourhood plan. But I think the choice is quite stark, really. It's further delay, or sort of pragmatically, I think, sort of saying, well, we can't do this, but we've got to move this thing forward.
Yes.
Can I just ask Michael to clarify something regarding, so if these sites are removed, and this is, I would say, as much for anybody listening as anything, I just want to clarify that the fact that they are not in the neighbourhood plan as allocated sites, would that in any way, apart from the potential Environment Agency flooding objection, would that be something that would make these sites less likely to succeed at planning?
Oh, only in terms that they're not allocations in your neighbourhood plan. But you probably know as well as I know that there are people who own those sites and have got aspirations for those sites. You know, and we met with the owners of Spring Gardens Mill.
We
probably,
did.
I bet it's going on for 4 years ago now, and they had different aspirations for that site than the town council. Those aspirations won't go away. And it, you know, it's already been mentioned that, you know, there are large areas there in the South Valley that are not currently used. I'm not saying they won't be developed. I'm not saying they're not attractive. It's just that they're not going to come forward if you go with my advice at the present time through the neighbourhood plan. But they could well come through Pendle's local plan, because Pendle can answer the Environment Agency's concerns, because they're privy to all that information. What are the alternatives in Nelson, Barn, Holswick, or wherever it may be. And of course, the people who own them and developers are going to have aspirations, and they may well bring them forward through the normal planning application process. Will the Environment Agency have concerns? Yes, they will, but they may well be able to throw resources at this that you can't to answer those questions. So, yeah, bottom line is they wouldn't be in the neighbourhood plan, but it doesn't mean they wouldn't come forward at some stage in the future.
Because they're brownfield land in the settlement boundary.
Yes. So my question was, would they be in any way prejudiced by not being in the neighbourhood plan in terms of the likely success from a planning perspective, regardless of the flood risk?
I don't think so. So if you take, for example, the Cone Market, we haven't put that down as a number, and yet we know that potentially is now coming forward. So things do come forward within the settlement boundary, as you know, all the time. Michael?
Yeah, on that question, the planning applications determined the starting point is the development plan. Your neighbourhood plan will be silent on those sites, so it would be whatever's in the local plan at the time. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they start at the bottom of the pile.
Okay. So it seems that, as Michael says, our choice is stark. We're none of us thrilled, because it takes away some flexibility, it takes away some choice for developers, but it doesn't take it away, it takes it away artificially rather than in actuality. And I think there's no point putting stumbling blocks, we've discussed this before with green spaces. Why put something in the plan that we know is going to fail? And it's a bit like this here, isn't it? So I propose that reluctantly and late in the day and slightly miffed, to say the very least, with the Environment Agency, we remove these sites from our plan. Jonathan shaking his head. Yeah, oh, okay, not at me. We remove these sites from our plan and we move forward with the other sites that we have, albeit diminished. I propose that, and then Gina gets on the phone to Way and his team and lets them know first thing in the morning. I don't know whether I have a seconder. Brian? So no sort of a opposition to that? No person saying let's do the sequential test? No? Okay, all those in favour then? Okay, so that's carried. I think Way will probably want to kill you, but I think you should deflect it straight away to the EA at this point. We've done our best and we've held our meetings in a timely manner as well. Okay, so other elements, we're still on item 8, other elements of the evidence base. So, with all of that happening, we've talked about the consultation statement that can be taken to the next level very simply. The design code is item 9, so we won't discuss that. Michael is working on the plan, the basic conditions, the heritage appraisal, the site assessments, the SEA and the HRA, that's all in your area. Gina and I had a chat earlier. We realised that all of that is in your area. We just wanted to say to you that if there's anything we can do to help any of those things in your area, we're on it, because we really, really want to get those over the line, whether it's early reviewing or anything. If you want us to give us facts to check, we'll go and do it.
They're all in a reasonable state of preparation. It's a bit like I said in these meetings before, because these things are all sort of interdependent, and we're waiting on things like the Environment Agency. Now you've made a decision on that, I can begin to sort of put all these to bed and finalise them. So yeah, I would hope that, I think is the 5 there, that all 5 of those can be
There are 6. There are 6.
There are 6.
Well, there's the plan, the basic conditions, the consultation statement, the site assessments, the heritage appraisal, SEA and HRA. 6.
Oh, I missed the SEA. Yeah. So they can all be sort of brought to a reasonable state of conclusion.
I think my plea to you, bearing in mind our sort of workflow, is that you don't bring them all to the same level. You sort of get 3 out of the door for our next meeting, so we can move it on to full council, and then perhaps another 3, rather than just give us 6.
Yeah, for my purposes, the one that I would like to put to the very end, and I know locality have mentioned this in the health check email, is the basic conditions statement.
Right.
Because that looks at the final plan to say why it meets the basic conditions.
Yes.
And I know locality have suggested we could supply that, but we would actually only prepare that right at the very end.
That's absolutely fine. And for the rest of you, Locality have written us actually rather a sweet letter to say that they guarantee that the basic conditions, that's our MOT that we're so keen to do, would be done within 28 days. But they've added, and I think this is Dave Chapman's influence, that they could probably do it in a fortnight. So that is very, very reassuring and encouraging. And that gives us a sort of seal of approval for Pendle to say, yes, this is in the top 1% of plans, but look who has been over it for us, so that you can feel confident in Regulation 15.
I think they wanted some kind of indication of when we're likely to want that health check.
It's not going to be before May, is it? If the basic conditions is the last one.
Yeah.
Well, from reading locality's email, I think they're saying they acknowledge that some of the documentation wouldn't be available. I think I'd like to negotiate that we don't supply the basic. They can have all the others, but not the basic condition statement.
Okay.
In fact, the health check would inform the basic condition statement, because you'd be telling you
Yes.
where they think you've gone wrong. So
Yes.
it seems a bit bizarre, really, to provide them with that, only to have to revise it again.
I think just to keep them with us on the journey, Gina, I think it would be really reasonable for you to reply to their email to say, these are the documents that we've already passed that are on our website. These are the documents that we are working on now we've finalised our housing sites. We do expect them within the next couple of months or so to have passed full council. This is the best indication that we can give you, albeit there's still uncertainty. We really appreciate your speed and your focus, and thank you for writing to us, that kind of thing, because I think we are really grateful that they've been proactive. Proactive isn't a thing you often come across, is it, really? I mean, just to be clear, they wrote to Gina rather than the other way around. So we want to keep them keen, don't we? We might not be able to give them the most exciting documents, but they might as well be working on them, or looking at them. So I think that is everything under item 8, which is other elements of the evidence base. Yeah? So moving on to item 9, design code consultation. It's quite funny, this, in some senses, because you could see some people having a little rant. So what I've done is I have sent to Michael and Gina what I think in orange is something we ought to look at and consider, and where something is absolutely wrong and we ought to change it, I put it in yellow. It's not all Pendle Council, a lot of it is. Some of the residents have made some very cogent points. Some of the residents have just written supportive things, or some of the residents have written saying, I like old code, or whatever. They've just written something nostalgic. I think one of the funniest ones that I discussed with Gina earlier is the approach on panel fencing. So you've got resident 1 saying, I really hate panel fencing. Resident 2 saying, panel fencing isn't good for us. It goes on like that. And then at the bottom it says, Pendle Council, panel fencing is standard. I think our residents are really clear in their responses that they don't like, in a lot of locations, panel fencing. So on that one, I didn't colour it in orange or yellow, because I felt that the residents spoke for us. Shall we go through this page by page? I don't know, I'm hoping that you've had chance to read this. And No, I've done this. You've got the basic document. This is my 2 penneth. So, and I've only shared it with Gina and Michael because their views may be different and your views may be different. So we go through it 1 page at a time. Page 1, question 1, question 8, it says here. Yeah, question number 8. I have put in orange the words of the Borough Council. A lot of those other things tend to be what people are either confused by or supporting. I feel that figure XX, the comment that's above the Pendle one, was before the document was changed. Yes, so I think that one is irrelevant. So apart from Pendle Council, I think that's the only one we need to consider on question 8. Yeah? Question 9, I didn't see anything here that needs a rewrite. These are tending to be views, people's views. People have asked for the wording to be stronger. I don't think that it could be. These are people's views here on question 9. I don't think that we need to reconsider any elements in this section. Yes or no? Yeah?
Can I just ask a very quick question? Why are there an age group?
It's quite interesting, isn't it, to see people who were the most engaged. And rather sadly, Jonathan, it's people almost as old as me or older than me that are the most engaged. And I think we can show that we've tried our best to try to communicate with people, but we haven't managed to really make young people thrilled with this. So, I know. So, yeah, so question 9, I'd like to ask Michael this question about this Pendle Council comment. Is the phrase creating a loop movement network accurate? This is not a formal traffic management arrangement. Consider whether this description is appropriate. I genuinely have no idea.
Neither do I.
That sort of makes me feel better. I understand what they were saying. I think what Pendle Council are saying is this isn't an official terminology.
I think the only thing you can do is go back to ACOM and seek clarification what they actually mean.
Okay, so we'll seek clarification from ACOM. Okay. So now I haven't highlighted their question underneath about the study area. It seemed incredibly nitpicky because we know that the boundaries of Cone have not changed. What has changed is the borough wards. But the borough wards are not a thing within our study area. I think this is a chimera here.
I'd still be saying to ACOM, could you please just change study area to designated neighbourhood area?
Okay.
Then there's no argument then.
Okay, well, we don't want an argument, do we? I'm making notes, but I'm guessing that Gina's making notes as too, so perhaps I don't need to make notes. Okay, so I don't have anything more for that first page. Does anybody else? No. Okay. Page 2. Again, for me, it is the Borough Council here. Question 10. I mean, we wouldn't disagree with that, would we? That is a correct statement about external walls of traditional buildings. So shall we just go with that? Yeah, happy with that? Okay, bottom of the page, I've highlighted again. So this is question 12. Sorry? Figure 12, sorry. Use of the word former is inappropriate in this instance as parts of the biological heritage. No, what was it? No, parts of the. Where am I? Oh, right. Well, I haven't included that. Sorry, you can't see what I've done orange. It's the last two on the bottom of the page there. Yes. Do you want to have Dewhurst Street? No.
I thought you meant Dewhurst.
No. Sorry, that's my fault because I'm looking at something that you're not looking at. I'm right at the very bottom of the page with the two local authority comments here. And I've put one in orange and then the second one in yellow because clearly that is wrong. I've never heard of North Valley Stream, but if they say...
Sorry, I'm lost. It's also the next page of this document.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
It's
The bottom of the
3.2. 3.2. That's where I am, sorry. Because I'm obviously looking at a document that Jean has just printed out. So yes, I've got that question there in paragraph 4 in orange, and then underneath, 2 bits in yellow, all about the names of the rivers. I've never heard of North Valley Stream. Obviously have heard of Trawden Brook. But I thought it was called the River Lane Shore.
It is the River Lane Shore.
And North Valley Stream is under North Valley Road.
Yeah, well, he's saying that we've got it the wrong way round. Who is the definitive person for this? Jerry, are you Mr. River Lane Shore?
Yeah, the River Lane Shore runs
Through Laneshire Bridge?
runs to Wall Road.
Yeah, exactly.
The nature reserve.
Yes,
And there it becomes Combe Water.
yes.
And North Valley Stream is actually now piped under the Sainsbury's and right through to Boundary Hill.
Right, okay. But it seems that we've got,
Used to be open.
it seems that we've got something wrong here, doesn't it?
Well, they're saying that the River Lane Shore stops when it meets Whitehall Bay,
Right,
which is in Laneshire Bridge.
right,
Going to Carriers Road.
right.
That's where it meets up. Yeah. And from there on, they are saying it's got water. Yeah. So we've obviously using this one wrong on that.
So I suggest we just change that.
Yeah.
No?
I was looking at this the other day.
Okay.
I think if you look on Google Maps, sometimes a Google map identifies a river name.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether Pendle have got it from Google. And therefore... Exactly. That's my point. Do we have a better resource than Google Maps for a river name? Surely.
Right, it is actually where the Whitehall Bay meets with the Lake Shore. And then it flows on to Hall Road from there. That is where Hall Road starts, with the path.
So at Carriers Row, where it goes under, there's a bridge, is that the confluence of the two
That's
rivers?
the confluence of the Whitehall Bay and the River Lane Shore.
Right.
Just to coincide with that bridge,
Yeah.
they join.
Yeah,
That's where
yeah,
Hall Road starts.
right. Oh well, maybe I don't know, maybe I'm wrong then. Maybe just me revisiting though.
Okay, well, I've put it all in yellow. And I've put in orange underneath that, the baseline, the use of the baseline study. I think it's very simple to just consider stopping the use of the chapter heading after page 20. I think we should just go with that. And then the next yellow box is right underneath it. And I think this is a really important one because seemingly we failed in the map to put St Bartholomew's Church inside the sort of historic bit of Cone, settlement focus area A. So they've written here, consider amending the boundary to include the Grade 1 listed church and its environs. And of course that is the conservation area as well. So I think that is vital that we change. But the bit underneath, it says unclear about the justification of excluding the residential areas north of Red Lane and Regent Avenue from the area D, focus area D. Consider amending. Well, I can't see why. And, you know, I genuinely can't see what they're getting at there.
Well, there are houses on the north side of Red Lane.
And then he's got a stronger point here to do with the Knots Lane thing, settlement focus area E. The modern character of the Persimmon development is markedly different to the more traditional buildings south of the A56 and the east of Knots Lane. Ensure how a uniform design code can apply across these areas is the use of a finer grain. So what he's saying is those terraced houses are really, really separate from, you know, the modern Knots Lane development. Could there be a subset within E? Don't know whether we call it E2 or we break out another letter. Because I think it will be a very small subset. What do you say, Michael? He's saying consider identifying sub areas within E.
I think this comment sort of misses the point, really.
Okay.
The areas that ACOM came up with were, you know, sort of broad character areas, settlement focus areas.
Okay.
And they were picking up on how, you know, how different parts of the town have different characteristics. But did they sort of go down to that fine grain and distinguish between terrace streets and more modern stuff? Then the answer, I think, is no.
Okay.
I think, you know, maybe this picks up on one of Pendle's other comments, because at the end of the day, the only real value of this code is going to be if the people who build things and the local planning authority actually use it. So perhaps it just needs to be a bit clearer to say that, you know, the focus areas are picking up on certain key aspects, but it may be that some of those aspects are more applicable when you get to a finer grain in a different area. It's the design principles that are important, not whether the boundaries have been drawn right. This is not a character appraisal.
No.
And so I think that comment really sort of misses the point.
Okay.
And I think if you went back to ACOM to say, oh, could we start amending all these boundaries, I think they'd be sort of tearing the hair out and thinking, you know,
but
how on
really,
earth
we should have St Bartholomew's Church in our A, though, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I think that's
and we should not call F the legit conservation area, because it's more than the legit conservation area. We should call it something else. I think that's true. But I think that stuff in the middle where they start to get talking about slight differences between sub areas or things on Red Lane, as you say, is possibly not so important. Yeah. So there are definitely two changes to be made there, Gina. So what do we think lower down the page, 5.114, I've got this in orange, where they say the abbreviations for the design codes do not follow a consistent format, and in some cases their derivation is unclear. For example, the design codes for heritage assets are coded HA1, HA2, HA3, but those for urban structure and built form are not USBF1, USBF2. Consider simplifying the coding to help the clarity for the reader. Michael?
It's minor stuff, isn't it? Yeah.
Angry, aren't they? Constantly, every single comment and everything just like cutting.
Yes.
One thing is the entire document about the Pendle plan.
Yes. They've been quite cross throughout.
That's not a bit of positivity, is there?
I think the comment about the referencing, it is minor,
Yes.
but it can make a difference to the document's usability?
Usability.
And the amount to which it is used and
Yes.
consulted.
And we want to help with that.
Yeah, I think, I'll be honest, I haven't checked the full document on this, but when I read that, I thought, yeah, well, if what they're saying is true, then I think it would be worth changing those references. That would be my view.
Okay.
I agree also, you know, it saves the reader having to go to an index at the top at page, at bottom at page, doesn't it? You know, it's easy to.
Okay, so there are quite a few changes on that page, and everything so far has been from Pendle Council.
Yeah, sorry, just on that,
yeah.
I mean, I made a few similar comments when we were reviewing the document earlier, and that whole thing of cross-referencing the references to the matrix and so on, which has now been introduced, but I do think that will help clarity and readability.
Okay. Does anybody want to put anything else forward from that page? No? Okay, the next page. So looking at question 15. Now, I didn't understand this. I will be honest. I coloured it in orange from Pendle Council. Question the use of high status. Make specific reference to low quality designs in this instance. The word pastiche refers to a style that imitates another work, artist or period, and is used out of context here, appears to be used out of context here. How is the term better management to be interpreted by planning officers? Michael?
I'd suggest on that one, again, going back to ACOM and just seeing if they can tighten up the wording.
Okay. So this is where, yes.
I think any comment from Pendle in this document, probably any other documents that they comment on,
Okay.
should probably really be taken seriously, because if they're picking up on it here, then surely they're going to pick up on it at regulation 15.
Yes.
So any change, if we want to do a task, we can not really with any comments that made here. Is that right, Mark?
Well, it depends. It depends really on what, whether they think that they've had enough of a go at this, because technically it's not one of the submission documents; it's a supporting document. So they're probably going to have enough on their hands with the neighbourhood plan itself. But I do think in this instance, I think you're right. Yeah, if they're saying that this is sort of vague wording, then I do think ACOM should try and tighten that up so that officers know what it's referring to, and they're not having to sort of try and second guess it. Because I think inevitably when you start trying to second guess it, you probably end up ignoring it.
Okay. Well, I'd ignored their response to question 16 because I just thought it was ridiculous about varied roof lines. You know, obviously we need to consider the roof line with any new application. It was really clear to me that they say the determination of planning applications needs to say how a new development is expected to respond to it. I was fearful that that was stating the bleeding obvious, you know, but perhaps you're right. We just refer everything to ACOM. No?
Well, I think on this one, again, I think it's about how the document's used and how people are, you know, my expectation is they put the design code brings out elements and things to consider, but it's not to provide a solution. That developers, advisors and local planning authorities officers should be able to make their own judgments about whether a development responds to the varied roof lines.
That's why I didn't colour it in orange. It just seems so obvious to me.
And I think, think if you turn, I'm off as well. I think if you turn this on its head, and sort of if ACOM had come up with certain solutions, I've got a strange feeling that Pendle would have come back and said, "Oh, that's far too prescriptive, and you've got to allow developers to respond to the context and office to make, you know, an informed judgment."
A bit like they did over the design codes and viability and panel fencing.
I think it's a bit. Yeah, I think it's a sort of cake and eat it point, that one.
Okay.
I would agree, because I mean, you may recall I banged on endlessly about this thing not being too prescriptive.
Yes.
Because I think that's a very negative thing, and can have some very unintended consequences. And
it's a tightrope, isn't it? Because you can see that some residents have said, this isn't prescriptive enough, we need to be saying it. We need to be.
Indeed. Indeed. But it can easily stifle any creativity in designs in this area, and end up with just a poor outcome, shall we say.
Yeah. Okay, well, I didn't have anything on the next page. I note that Pendle Council had two comments on this next page. They had question 21, need to quantify low, medium and high density to aid with assessment. Do we need to quantify that?
Personally, I'd say no.
Okay, so I was right not to colour it orange. And then the dreaded panel fencing is question 22. All the residents are so against it. And then the Pendle Council writes, this requirement is too restrictive. Panel timber fencing is widely used within the construction industry. I think the point is that we agree with the residents here. I don't think we're going to change it, are we?
Panel fencing. Are these the fencing type which is stuck between concrete posts?
Yes.
Typical concrete posts, right?
It doesn't make for a good street scene, Jonathan.
It's not the vertical intermist in the one that out the yellow one.
They've got actually an enforcement case on Red Lane about it at the moment. You know, because if you're walking down the street, you don't want to be walking down a blind alley. These are, yeah, it's like walking in a tunnel. You can't see the houses, you can't see over. So I'm totally against removing this one, but other people may disagree with me. The residents seem to agree with me. Okay, so I've turned over. So on question 24, lots of people seem to agree with this, and quite often with these residents' comments, there are, you know, when they're talking about dark skies and charging points, we know that they are in the plan. You know that this is included within the design code, but the electric charging points is one of our policies within our neighbourhood plan. So it's not like we're not taking note of these residents. It's just that these residents are just stating something that we already have. But Pendle Council write, design code, the reference will only be granted, so they also think we're being too bold, is a policy statement, remove reference from the design code and include within policy. Michael? They do this several times now from here on in.
Yeah, I think if you take those on that page, I agree with the will only be granted. You wouldn't even get away with that in the neighbourhood plan policy. So that needs watering down in some way.
Right. And then in the next question.
I think the other two, where I'd just change shall to should. Again, because we're talking about elements here that designers should consider. We're not saying you must do it.
No.
And sometimes it might not be appropriate, might not be feasible. But in an ideal world, these are the things that would make your development high quality.
Yeah. So on question 26, they also say the planting and removal of trees outside the red edge will be difficult to control. Consider how this requirement can be controlled. Page 70.
What do they got red edge? Do they mean the south side plan boundary side? Or what?
Or do they mean our whole neighbourhood planning area? I'm unclear. .5.5. What do you think, Michael?
I assume the red edge means a planning application.
Right. Right.
But again, you know, technically, yes, if it's outside the red edge, can you do anything about it? But again, this is a code about encouraging, you know, better developments.
Yes.
I think it's a technical point. Again, I'd ask ACOM to see if they can address that in some way. But again, I think it goes against the flow of the document, which is about encouraging things, not finding reasons not to do them.
Exactly. And you see that, oh dear, you see that residents here write, you know, further consideration on lighting, bats, birds, dark skies. We do have that. That is in the plan. So it's not that we're not paying attention to the residents. That's there. So I'm on the next page, 5.7, page 74, question 28. I don't understand this at all. All about climbing aids.
I think they're just picking up on the grammar there. Again, I think it's just a case of ACOM rewording that.
Now, this is a question that a resident has asked. You use the term elderly-friendly design. Can we include the information in the standard, and is there a standard to refer to? Gina and I were having a conversation earlier about footpath standards, weren't we? Because that came up. Is there a standard for these things?
Well, there's lifetime homes, and I think Age Concern have their own design guide. I think lifetime homes is probably a better wording, but the problem is then that in itself is it's jargon.
Could these be included as an appendix? The Age Concern.
Well, I think that's just going to add further complication, isn't it? Because, as I say, the Age Concern thing, I think, is a guide
rather than a.
I don't think you'd append it.
Okay.
Couldn't we just include a statement that we encourage people to consult these documents and reference them? There's also guidance on dementia-friendly design, which is, I think, an important aspect.
Could we add that?
Which is much little understood.
Yeah, you could add in referencing. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a really good suggestion. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so here we go. I think this is Colin, I'm guessing, all about low carbon energy biomass. It is a complicated matter, this. We can't just say we're pro it or we're not pro it. And I think it is worthwhile putting in some of this extra information about particulates and so forth. Do people agree with me that we refer this to ACOM to be looked at? Okay, then we've got Pendle Borough Council again. So if you remember, I went on a webinar where they said that when you're planning new housing estates, you should plan all the houses so they face south, so they can have solar panels on their roofs, and it makes a huge difference if you think about this at the moment that you're doing your master planning. And I discussed this with Neil Watson, and he said it was contrary to the MPPF. And I suppose it is complex because we are looking at where houses sit in the topography, how we view them from a distance on one level, you know, standing here outside the town hall. And on another level, we're saying they should be orientated a certain way to help make those houses sustainable for those residents. So on the one level, we're looking at the broader community and all about the look. And on the other level, we're looking about Mr. Miggins's electricity bills. And I can see there is a conflict there. Jerry.
Surely the design code is not intended to specify things like that.
No.
We can make a suggestion that it be considered that one of the roof faces has a southern aspect.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be the front of it.
No.
It could be the back that's southern orientated. The difficulty comes in houses that have to be north-south, because they're going to get it only in the morning or only in the evening.
I think it's a bit like I said before, it's one of them sort of cake and eat it points, isn't it? Sort of, you've said something, now tell us what it is, but if you tell us what it is, we're going to say you're being too prescriptive. You know, the whole basis of the planning system is you reach a planning judgment on things.
Yes.
So it may be within the landscape. You cannot have fabulously energy efficient buildings because of the impact on wider views and heritage assets. So you know, part of that balance in terms of that judgment is that certain things wouldn't be acceptable, whereas in other areas they would be. And as I say, I think it misreads what the code's about. It's about identifying a set of principles, design principles for Colne that can then be used by the people who bring forward proposals and those who assess them. Not giving you a sort of a menu you must choose from.
Right. And actually, the next comment, which is a very broad comment over quite a few pages, they're really saying that we can't say this because quite a few elements are within the scope of permitted development. So this is this box right down at the bottom.
I think there's an important point there. Yes, certain things are permitted development. You know,
doesn't mean they should be.
you know, and you know, if we're fortunate enough to be homeowners, we might have permitted development rights that allow us to do things. But again, in doing that, there are choices to be made. And again, the code could be used by homeowners for things that are already permitted, but it encourages them to do things in a way perhaps that they haven't considered.
And it's the kind of thing that really should come at pre-application. It's like that planning application that we've had in front of us for Allotments. So we heard, didn't we, at the last meeting, the last full council, that it probably had to be like that because of Allotments branding. Well, I went to Rottenstall on Saturday and took a picture of the Allotments there, and it would be wholly appropriate within our conservation area to have Rottenstall's shop front in Cone. So Rottenstall can have it, and if you put the aspiration there, so can Cone. But if you don't put the aspiration, you're not going to get it, are you? I think that's clear. And then to the end of this paragraph, John goes on about talking about key views and vistas not identified within the design codes. I wonder whether we don't put a whole section from our report in this document, but do we do a cross-reference to say, see this document that fully deals with this issue?
Yeah, again, I think it's that cross-referencing.
It's true about Bargain Booze as well. In Padiham, Bargain Booze has a wholly different facade in its conservation area. And I think all of this kind of stuff should come when there's a pre-application advice. You know, you should say, well, actually, this is what you should be considering, as opposed to, oh, you allowed it within permitted development, or it's considered like for like replacement. Okay. Yes. Sorry, I take my glasses off and then I can't see you.
Can you just give me an example of one of these issues that they're suggesting is within our design code, but is within the scope of permitted development? Do we have a specific example?
I would suspect it might be, I don't know, to do with, say, if you take dormer windows not in conservation areas. I'm making it up, but supposing it is, it would be potentially permitted development. Certainly on the backs of buildings, it would be permitted development, but it might conflict with our design code.
But not on all.
No.
Sorry, but not on all. So you know, there are exceptions, you know, as Michael will know, there are exceptions to permitted development rights. And, you know, for instance, a more recent development may have those permitted development
taken
rights taken away as part of the planning consent.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, I'm not clear in my mind whether they're right in all cases or whether they're sort of being very broad brush themselves in this comment. What's your view, Mike?
I think the best way to look at it is a house extension. Yeah, you know, most homes have permitted development rights for a house extension. So I could, you know, put something up that's render, flat roof, pebble dash.
Not on a grade 2 listed building, you can't.
Well, I did say more. I did say most. You know, so yeah, you know, if I wanted to do, I could do something that's cheap and cheerful. But this document works hopefully at another level, and you know, if it's wide enough known about, and it can encourage people to do, you know, not the cheap and cheerful, and so that you know, if it's in a terraced area where a different treatment would be more appropriate, you know, you've got the principles there that would encourage that. You know, we could probably all walk around, you know, various streets and pick off the extensions that simply, you know, don't really fit in and bring the area down. You know, I know there's a cost element to the homeowner there, but, you know, my view is if you can encourage a certain proportion to do what they normally wouldn't have done, then I think the document has a value of, you know, that you didn't quite expect.
Well, it's our last Cone area. We were asked to consider a flat-roofed extension that went all the way down to within 2 metres of the bottom of the garden. and was just humongous. But seemingly that potentially was within that sphere. We thought it was poor design, but officially, apparently, potentially, it fell within permitted development. But this, obviously, our design code, it would contravene it on a design level. And
But my point was, if there are any exceptions where it would legitimately apply anyway, then surely we shouldn't consider removing it from our. I agree with Michael's comment about it setting, it's giving a broad brush principle that people can choose to follow. But if there are any exceptions where it would apply anyway, then surely we shouldn't remove it or do anything different. But anyway.
okay, I'm on the next page. So, top of the next page, again, the Borough Council. This is a matter of the cross-referencing that we discussed earlier. The absence of references to the focused areas within the design codes limits the transparency and usability of the document. Okay. So are we on 30? .2. So this is just a matter of making it easier to understand within colour coding and usability. So I think this is a simple refer to ACOM. All of the others on that page are residents saying things like green spaces need protection, grassroots community planning for Cone, rather than being dictated to by PBC technocrats. Not sure there are technocrats, quite exciting. So I think we just note, so for example, somebody's written here, it is much more than housing sites, helpful in sports and recreation sites, for example. And they're talking about sports and recreation. Well, we know that we've got a list of all the sports and recreation places within Cone, within our main plan. So I don't think that we are against any of those comments of the residents, really. We know that it slots in somewhere. And the next page, which are I think, is it question 7? Have I gone backwards? This is, I followed this document correctly, I think. It's this one. Question 7. And then it goes to 31. Yes, okay. So 7, I didn't find anything with this. This is talking about the new developments we already have. And that's quite interesting, actually, because there were some very strong views against certain developments and quite positive views against other developments, and even contradictions where one resident said that they really liked a development and then another resident didn't. Though, obviously you can't please all of the people all of the time, but we see quite a lot of comments, but they're comments rather than a need to change our design code. And then we're looking at the final page, question 31. There's quite a lot of praise for us here. Excellent work, one huge set of documents, well done, Cone, commendable effort to preserve our heritage, etc., etc. Nice to see. But then, I think rather seriously here from Pendle, a need to check our hyperlinks. So they've tested us and we have failed, and they've suggested that we use an Adobe Acrobat accessibility tool. I have to say that sounds desperately dull, but I think it absolutely should be done for usability. It is very much. We sort of basically expected them to make that happen for us, didn't we? If this document fails to meet the accessibility legislation, we will not be able to publish it to the Pendle Council website. So we've been warned. Yeah,
Right, so 31.
yes.
Was question 31 like something like what is your overall opinion of the? Yes. Right, so somebody has said, no, this looks like a typical consultant's report. Repeats what you already knew, wrapped up in fancy pictures and jargon, and mandates nothing in fear of upsetting someone. It's the same person I mentioned before.
Yes, it's the same person. They've been
said
quite
nothing
negative.
positive at all.
No.
And it's like, where have they been?
We caught them on a bad day.
If they were so opinionated, why don't they join us, 7 years ago when we started this? Where have they been?
But if you notice, that's actually the only negative. They've been consistently negative throughout, and it's actually the only negative comment in this set of comments. So I think, I just repeat the fact that you can't please all of the people all of the time, and all we can do is try to consider everything and try to implement where applicable. I think we've obviously got some stuff to do there. So you've got more bad news to give to Way. I mean, I don't know whether you want me to ring him first before we hit him with the email. Do you think I should? Rather than just have him receive it cold. Shall I ring Ray? And tell him, because he's got 2 pieces of bad news there, and I think he'll be quite taken aback by the numbers of things that we definitely want changing. We might want recolouring, recoding and checking, and we might want rewording as well. It's not an insubstantial amount of things to do. So when do you think you could have the resume of these notes ready for a sort of Way instruction? Oh dear, Gina's puffing out her cheeks.
I can try and get something by the end of this week.
Okay, so if I speak to him tomorrow, then we can say before the end of the week, you'll hear from Gina with the detail, and we'd like it back as soon as you can. Yeah, okay. Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, you're leaving, Jerry. You said hello, and then I took my glasses off, and then I couldn't see you. Okay, so that's everything to do with the design code consultation. Done. That is a lot to do. I think if Way could bring it back for our next meeting, then we couldn't possibly have the design code passed by full council until May, I think. Yeah. Okay. A review of other work areas yet to be completed, that's already been done. Items for future month's agenda. Keep on going. Oh, you've got an idea.
I thought of one earlier.
Oh dear.
It relates to this.
Right.
I asked for this a few meetings ago.
Yes.
And I mustn't have been clear enough.
Right.
And I know you've already answered the thing about the time, about how it can be varied.
Because we don't know whether we're going to get the next iteration of something and just go, do you know what, that's bob on, or we need to change it again.
Yeah, I just think what I was referring to is what I call a Gantt chart.
Yes.
Where you have an item, and that item has got a timeline from A to B. So at the moment we've no timeline, have we?
No.
And so we've no exit strategy, and we've no light at the end of the tunnel. Am I speaking out of turn when I say that, or not? Because John's mentioned it's like there's no sort of end date, and it bothers me really.
Yes, I think the thing is, though, we haven't had our health check, so I am fully aware that the health check, I'll bring you in, the health check may come back with something unexpected, probably not as unexpected as the Environment Agency, but then we'd have to put that right before we could then go to Reg 15. I'm really reluctant, having thought that we were going to go to Reg 15 last year, and having worked as hard as I possibly can, to sort of put a date on it when there were so many outside people still to come back with things, because it's not down to just us or Gina or Michael.
I think after you raised that, I did send out 2 Gantt charts. Were they not circulated?
We were still umming and ahhing of whether it was going to be February or March.
Right, I drafted 2 options. One with the sort of fair wind, and one that had, you know, if we didn't hit key dependencies. I'm more than happy to revisit that based on what we've talked about this evening.
But I really do feel that it should just be kept to members of this advisory committee so that they are aware rather than making it a public document.
Yeah, that's fine, you know, but, I don't think I've seen that. But then maybe now we will have to revisit it and reissue that, but, I was going to say, there are, yes, totally appreciate there's third parties at work here
We're relying on third parties to reply, and we don't know how long, especially governmental bodies, Environment Agency as an example. You know, you take it with a pinch of salt, you know, it's like, right, X is with Environment Agency, awaiting response. That's all it needs to say, really. But at least say, you know, you'd expect a reply within 2 months, for example.
Well, that wasn't the case.
No, as an example.
Yeah.
I know it might not be the case, but, you know, planning applications, eight weeks, normally, unless it's like major, massive. So at least you know, roughly, when you can have an exit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We all want an exit, Jonathan. Paul?
I agree with Jonathan in principle, because the thing is that unless you know, if any building project, as Jonathan well knows and I well know clearly, you know, unless you have a programme, you rarely hit your target. So you have a target, and it has to, by definition, include a lot of assumptions. The earlier the target is put together and the program's put together, the more assumptions are built in. We're fairly well down the line here. There are still assumptions to be made, but I would say that all of these consultations, or anything which is outside of our remit, then you just make a reasonable assessment of what you think the likely turnaround of that is going to be. And then you've got a target. It's not a fixed thing. And I understand your reticence about making it a public document, because as soon as you do, it becomes fixed in people's minds.
Yes, and then it goes on Cone
But
Talk.
I do think that as a group, it helps drive the process forward, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Paul has really summed it up there.
Mm-hmm.
The drive.
I certainly have the drive. Gina has the drive. We do have the drive. We're driving.
Route 66,
We've just had a Route 66 extension, I think. So, anyway, well, you know, I obviously thank you for being with us on the journey, because it's been a longer journey than any of us anticipated, more complicated and more frustrating. But I do feel that every single month we put documents into Cone Town Council as a good month. And I hope that we can put forward another David's asleep. I hope we put forward another 2 or 3 in the month ahead. And that's what I want to do, if at all we can. So we cannot have a date and time of the next meeting. It's when documents are ready for us to pass them through. As soon as they are ready, then we will. Thank you. Sorry? No, as soon as we have the documents. You weren't even asleep.